we have transferred, we being Congress, I'm not in Congress obviously, Congress has transferred over $30 billion from the general fund of the Treasury to the Highway Trust Fund to keep the Highway Trust Fund solvent. We've basically broken the user fee connection between the dollars going into the trust fund and what's coming out of it. Now, why is that important? It gets a little bit technical, mumbo jumbo, but for those of you, TxDOT and MPOs, you guys know this a little bit more. But we got something in the federal budget we call contract authority. So when a normal bill passes, they get budget authority, which means you might be able to go spend money on amount X on some issue. So next time they pass a farm bill, they're going to say, well, that's a $500 billion bill. Well, that money's not going anywhere in the farm bill until the appropriators say it's going somewhere. We got a different deal in transportation and highways and transit. We got contract authority, which means if we pass a $450 billion bill, that money's going somewhere. That's $450 billion. It's got to go to transportation. Why? Because highways and transit is paid for by user fees. Well, if you're not paying with user fees, we no longer have that guarantee. We no longer have the $450 billion bill means that that money's going to be there in 2015 for that project. It means, well, we're going to kind of hope and pray that maybe by 2015 there'll be some more money that you can put in and maybe that project will get there. And so there goes that long-term planning. There goes TxDOT's ability to look out into the future and say, yeah, you know what, I think we got formula funds coming, and so, yeah, you know what, you guys can go ahead and apply for projects in 2015. So if we don't continue to connect user fees, aka fuel taxes, to the Highway Trust Fund, we break the ability to look into 2015 and say, yeah, you might have that project money out. So why am I spending so much time talking about this? This is always the elephant in the room, because people say, well, how are you going to pay for a bill? That's why the U.S. Chamber has said the way to get a highway and transit bill paid for is by raising the gas tax. And it is not a particularly popular notion. Usually when somebody from the U.S. Chamber talks about this, somebody starts falling out of their chair and having minor heart palpitations. What are you guys doing talking about raising taxes? But as Tom Donahue, my boss, likes to say, you get what you pay for. And that's what this all comes down to. If you want a road, you want a runway, you want to fix your locks or your dams, you're going to have to pay for it. And infrastructure costs money. And so that brings me to the second thing I wanted to talk to you about, which is what's the Chamber doing about infrastructure generally. Because we got all sorts of stuff going on with highways and transit. You can visit our Americans for Transportation Mobility website, fasterbettersafer.org. We'll make sure you get that up on your website. You can see all of what we've got to do between now and about September to make sure legislation gets written. We get to members of Congress, we figure out how to pay for a reauthorization bill, and then they come back from the election, and in my dream scenario, they pass all of their bills out of committees and on the floor of the House and the Senate, and we have this speed demon conference so that by December 31st we actually have a long-term bill and we can all start doing something else. But if that doesn't happen, I got to go to Plan B, which is, holy cow, what are we going to do to try and make sure we get a bill next year? And can we still hold on to this ability for long-term planning? Contract authority, but this is all similar to something else that is common across all infrastructure. So the U.S. Chamber a couple years ago started something we call the Let's Rebuild America initiative. All right, is this working? Because if it's not, I'm putting it down. Can you hear me in the back?
You didn't shut it off, did you? No.
I don't know, did I shut it off? Nope, didn't shut it off. Look, little green light on.
We can hear you, but...
You can hear me? But just about. All right. So I don't know what happened to this. Oh, magically. Oh, yes, no. All right. Somebody wave at me if I need to project a little bit more. We started the Let's Rebuild America initiative because we realized that, first of all, infrastructure is more than just highways and transit. We all know that. That we've got to figure out how we maintain what we've got of transportation, energy, broadband, and water infrastructure. We modernize it so that it works for the future. Yep, there we go again. Maybe it's over here. If I stand here? No. Over here? All right, here's what we're doing. I will talk very loudly. Can you hear me now? It's like Verizon. Anybody here from Verizon? I cannot hear in my own house. We've got to talk about that. Maintain, modernize, and expand transportation, energy, broadband, and water infrastructure, because those things are the physical platform of the economy. We can't make and move people, goods, information unless we have all of those things. And all of those things cost money. And so we know that we need at the Chamber to first of all make sure good decisions are being made about where we're investing dollars. So we don't need bridges to nowhere, and we don't need all those things that make people go, there's no way I'm voting for a gas tax increase, because all you're going to do is take that money and put it somewhere else. We got to make good choices. We got to make sure we remove and prevent obstacles to doing those things that we want to do. So we've got to deal with environmental laws. We've got to make sure we deal with union-related issues that might make it too expensive to do things. We got to take on the not in my backyard folks who are saying, yeah, well, we really want alternative energy, but we're not going to put solar panels where the sun shines. Diane Feinstein in California is really good at that. And the third thing we got to do is find as much possible public and private money to put into infrastructure. So I just spent the whole first piece of what I'm talking about we need to raise the gas tax so the federal government can be a partner. But you know, TxDOT knows as well as anybody else, because they've been a leader in this a long time. It's not just federal dollars that are going to save everything. You got to have state dollars, you got to have local dollars, and you got to have opportunities for the private sector to bring their expertise to the table. Oh, they'll try and troubleshoot that, but now I can wave both my hands. I'm excited about this. So the U.S. Chamber said we've really got to put a face, we've got to put a business face on infrastructure. Because, you know, the construction community, which we represent, the users, the direct users of the transportation system, trucking companies or energy companies or the Verizons of the world, they can advocate, and they're always advocating for their stuff, but we really need to make a connection between infrastructure and the economy and what infrastructure does for the economy. So our big project that we're very excited about this year is to create a tool so that we can talk about the relationship between infrastructure and the economy. We're calling it the Infrastructure Index Project. And we are going out around the country and to our members, and we're asking for help articulating what's important to business and why about transportation, energy, broadband, and water. Because, you know, I spend a whole lot of time saying transportation's important to business, energy's important to business. Does this work? Can you hear me now? But trying to really specifically argue that we need to invest in energy infrastructure, meaning we need to make sure energy companies can invest in their own infrastructure, and trying to specifically argue we need those broadband companies to invest in their infrastructure, and we also need both public and private investment in transportation and water. When you really get down to it, it takes a little bit more to be specific about what's important to the economy. So we're going out. We'll be actually in Houston in a few weeks. Am I in Houston in a few weeks? I head to the airport and I call my assistant. I say, where am I going again? And we're going to have conversations with businesses about this. And then we're going to also have some conversations with chambers. We're going to be sending out some survey materials so that we can then go to the federal government and say, hey, here's what business thinks is important. Remember, the first thing I talked about is we got to get the most bang for the buck out of every investment we make. Well, if we can't say what's important to business about transportation, energy, broadband, and water, it's kind of hard to write that business plan for infrastructure. So we're in the middle of a big project to do that. Now, why do that and not just go up and lobby on Capitol Hill? Well, here's what we've determined. We need better arguments now than ever before to make infrastructure a priority. Going and talking about how $1 billion in federal money for roads supports 34,675 jobs, that's not cutting it. We got 27.1% construction industry unemployment. It's not cutting it. We've got to have those better arguments. That's what we're trying to do at the U.S. Chamber, is broaden that base of stakeholders for infrastructure, not just have the construction community talking, not just having the TxDOTs of the world, the MPOs talking, but we got to bring more people who can make those calls to their members and fly to Washington and talk about why infrastructure is important so we can move that to the top of the agenda. Because I tell you what, it was no fun getting trounced by health care for the last year and a half. But that's what was on the top of the agenda. What we've got to do in order to accomplish what I said initially on highways and transit is raise the priority. But there's a lot of other stuff going on. There's a third piece I was going to talk about in Washington on transportation.